If we practice Stoicism on a daily basis, the crimes can actually be limited.
So, men are really bad at showing out emotions.
Yeah. The youth should be educated about what's right and what's wrong,
Wrong,
rather than
absolutely.
teaching them about history and geography.
If you talk about Spanish culture, they do have dowries. You just don't name them dowry. Even though the person is a psychopath, he's definitely going to have some pattern in his mind. And then there was just a man who just came in running, and there were like two people behind him with a knife.
So hello guys, welcome to the second episode of Caffeinated with Visualjox. Today we have with us a very special guest and we are here to discuss a very interesting topic which we'll dive later on. But first, Rajas, please introduce yourself.
Okay, so firstly, thank you for all of this and getting me onto this. Okay, so about myself, as you said, I'm Rajas Kothare, and I am a master's in criminology. I did my bachelor's from Coventry University back in UK, and my master's was from National Institute of Criminology, which is in Delhi. And yeah, I am a criminologist.
So just for the record, the topic has been put out there.
Yeah.
So it's not a secret anymore. So yeah, Rajas, can you just walk us through your journey, like how you got started with this career and what made you interested in specifically getting into criminology? ये thought कहाँ से आया कि नहीं कि I have to get into criminology, I have to study criminology, and also what actually criminology consists of, because for our audience who I'm sure are pretty much like me, they have no idea what criminology is. All they can figure out it's some logic related to crime. So can you please just take us through कि कहाँ से आया thought, like no, I should get into criminology and study more about criminals and crimes. At least I suppose that's what it's about.
It is, yes. So if you ask me how did I get interested into it, so my grandfather, one of my grandfathers, and my mom's dad, he was a CID inspector. So I was always introduced to crime at a very young age, or I wouldn't say crime, but
Criminal activity.
not really that, but then defending crime. I mean, not defending, sorry, but stopping crime, I would say. So since I was very young, I used to visit him on my vacations or something, and he would always tell me interesting stories about how in his days he would go out, catch criminals, and then how his CID journey has been. So that's how I started reading about this subject as a whole, and I felt really interested about it eventually. And I would say my introduction to criminology as such was I think I was in 8th standard when I read Crime and Punishment by Fyodor Dostoevsky, which is one of the classics about crime, and it's a really big book, like this big. And reading it in 8th standard was a really big thing because I couldn't understand half of it as such. But then I again reread it in my 11th, I suppose, 11th, and then I got into it. Like, yeah, I should get into this field. So there is this thing about crime. So perpetrating a crime is a really difficult thing because it's not just about perpetrating it, but it's also about the other circumstances around it.
Yeah.
Okay, for example, it's really easy to commit a crime,
Yeah.
but it's really difficult to not get caught after that.
Yeah.
So for me personally, criminal is one of the most intelligent species you'll ever find on this planet.
Really.
Yeah, because it's really difficult to come up with something. So, but then someone who catches a criminal has to be much more intelligent than that person, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because crime is always going to be there, and there are always going to be new techniques of crime coming up. But then you also have to come up with new solutions for those crimes,
Exactly. Not every crime is the same, and neither is every criminal.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
yeah. So that is something which got me into criminology, and I was like, if criminal is intelligent, I'm smart
Yeah.
as well, so I can definitely get into that.
Exactly.
And yes, I mean it's also like giving back to the society in a way,
Yeah.
because I mean you're working for the society when you work
Exactly.
with crime, you work against crime.
Mhm.
And I would say, so when we come to the term criminology as such, it's an umbrella term, I would
Yeah.
say. It has everything from crime theories, what is a criminal, how to identify a criminal, how to catch a criminal. But it's not just till there. I mean, when you talk about crime, you also have to talk about the victims.
Yeah.
And even this is something that is included into criminology,
Yeah.
because it's a two-way process. I mean, if crime has happened, then also the victim has suffered for that.
Yeah. So
you
the
need to
crime has
take-
been committed onto someone.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So you also have to take their perspective into it. So criminology includes all of this stuff. So I would say it's not just till traditional crimes.
Yeah.
So when we talk the term crime as such, what is one thing that comes to your mind? It's usually murders.
Yeah. Murders, thefts,
Thefts,
something like
exactly.
that. Yeah.
But crime is much more than that. It's in many, many, many different mediums.
Yeah.
So nowadays, if we see, technological crime has been on the rise.
Cyber crime. Yeah.
Absolutely, cyber crimes. Not just cyber crimes, but economic crimes, I would say, as such. Because they're easy to do, firstly.
Yeah.
It's really difficult to go out and commit a murder. But
Yeah.
it's really easy to just hack someone's account and take money out of it.
Take money out of it. Yeah.
So as crime developed, I would say, or evolved, so did criminology.
Yeah.
I mean, you had to come up with new solutions to that. So this is something which all comes under criminology as a whole, I would say.
So basically, criminology is what, criminology is something that teaches you what goes behind the crime and what is the psychology of that particular criminal, stuff like that.
Absolutely, it does. It does. Okay, let's take like a scenario. Imagine crime to be a big drama.
Yeah.
It's going to be on stage. Imagine it to be a Broadway drama, okay? So when you talk about a drama, there is a lot of stuff behind it. There is backstage, there is on stage, there are lights, there are costumes. And you can relate all of this to crime. So when you
Yeah.
talk about a crime, it's everything related to it.
Right.
Everything from planning it to hiding it to not getting it caught. And when it comes to people like me as a criminologist, it's the way I would find it out.
Yeah.
So we criminologists, as such, we have to put ourselves in the criminal's shoes to understand the psyche behind it, like what they would have thought while doing it, or if I was that criminal, what would be my step to do about it?
Yeah. So basically it's not just limited to कि हमने देखा कि यार ये crime हो गया, इसने किसका murder कर लिया, या some particular crime has happened, theft हो गया या rape हो गया, and it's not just limited to कि हाँ उसको लगा उसने कर दिया और हो गया. It's never limited to that, right?
It's never limited
So
to
it's definitely something like, a lot of thought goes behind it.
Absolutely.
That's what it is actually. Like when we look at a crime, and good that you mentioned that, it's a drama, because a lot of these movies that we see on a daily basis, and even some TV series where, the crime is the main genre, they show us what goes behind the crime.
Absolutely.
So is it really like that? Like, is it a true scenario? Like a lot of thought has been going behind the crime, or is it just like कि जो cold blooded murder होते हैं उसको तो समझ आता है कि नहीं, they plan कि नहीं मुझे revenge लेना है, whatever. But what about the stuff that takes, what about the crimes that take, how can I frame it? So let's say I am a psycho, I am a psychopath, or I am a sociopath, and I am just going out on the streets killing random people. So what goes behind my, like, what's going on in my mind?
Okay, so since you mentioned about psychopaths or serial killer, I would say, who just goes out on street and kills people. Okay, so any crime, when it comes to crime, there has to be a motive behind a crime. You can't just commit crime behind a motive. That's the basic thing which even law requires.
Yeah.
Because there is no crime without a motive. Okay, but when you talk about a psychopath, for example, who is committing a crime, there isn't really any motive behind it, because it's just that there is something wrong within their head and they just want to do it. Okay, so personally, I don't think there is a lot of thinking which goes around when it comes to psychopaths, because it can be like a mental disease.
Yeah.
I mean, I just killed someone because I like killing someone, for example.
So then how do you manage to study these guys' psychology, or even, like, I don't know if it's involved when it comes to criminology, that catching these criminals. So is it included in that? Like, do these guys teach you how to catch criminals, or how does it go?
Okay. So not really catching criminals is what we are taught, but yeah, definitely. So when we talk about psychopaths, we are given different scenarios about how a psychopath would be thinking. As I said, we have to put ourselves into the criminal's shoes to understand what happens there. So yes, definitely we are told about how the person might have thought while doing the crime, or what would be the next step. So we do have some theories, or I would say some diagrams which we make while, or we map it out usually.
Yeah.
So any crime which happens in a particular order.
Yeah.
Okay. So for example, sometimes distance is an factor for that. So for example, if first crime is happening here, the second is happening 2 kilometers away, the third is happening more 2 kilometers away.
Yeah.
It's not going to happen between those lines usually, no, because even when you talk about a human body or a human brain, we usually go with a fixed pattern about doing things. Even though we all have different patterns to do stuff, but there is something that is mine. I do follow my routine in that pattern. Same applies with crime.
Yeah.
Even though the person is a psychopath, he's definitely going to have some pattern in his mind. Okay, I'm going to do it here, then I'm going to do it here, or this is my what do you call it, or this is my target audience. You know, so if you talk about someone like Charles Shobraj, for example, his target audience was always tourists.
Yeah.
Like, if you know who Charles Shobraj was.
I don't.
Okay, I can tell you about it.
Yeah,
if
yeah,
you want.
definitely.
Like,
Please go on.
so Charles Shobraj is one of the most intelligent criminals to ever live.
Okay.
He was half, if I'm not wrong, half French and half Burmese. And his parents were from the pre-independence era in India, and they used to stay in India.
Yeah.
So he was born here, and then he was famously, like, I wouldn't say famously, but infamously called the Bikini Killer.
Okay.
Because all of his target audience was in Goa or all of these other South Asian countries.
Okay.
And all he did was, he was so charismatic, he used to lure his targets, women.
Yeah.
And they used to fall in love with him. And so, of course, they would meet for the night, and then he would just tie them up or kill them and take all of their money.
Okay.
He had multiple passports doing that. Eventually, yes, he was convicted and he was caught, and he served his sentence. But just see how smart that person is. He's living in France now on a
Yeah.
French passport.
So he's still alive.
He is alive, yes. And all he did is he sold copyrights to his story to people to make films out of it.
Ah.
There is a film on somewhere on social media. I'm not sure what platform.
Yeah,
it's
because
called.
I saw a lot of
Yeah.
series, going on about Ted Bundy as well. So Ted
Absolutely.
Bundy had a similar story, right? Where he used to
did.
lure women into his
Yes,
charisma
yes,
and then
yes.
kill them or whatever. Like, I don't know
Absolutely.
what the purpose was. So when it comes to these guys, can you just tell me, like, what is the purpose behind the crimes that these guys commit?
Money. When it comes to these guys, it's absolutely money.
Okay.
Because all they did was just take money out of these people.
Yeah, it was easy to lure women because they had good
Absolutely.
looks.
Absolutely. They were really charismatic.
Okay.
So, one more thing which I knew about Charles is, so when he was serving his sentence in Tihar, so this is something I got to know when I was studying back in Delhi, and I got to meet the person who interviewed him
Okay.
in Tihar. And like, just see how smart this person was. The interviewee, the person interviewing him, she fell in love with him in jail. Like, that's how charismatic he was.
Yeah, so basically it's like, I saw this in that movie Suicide Squad.
Yeah.
So how Harley Quinn falls in love with the Joker.
Joker, absolutely, yeah.
So it's really like a game of psychology of how you get these guys to fall in love with you.
Absolutely.
And then you do whatever you want to do with them.
Yep. Absolutely.
Yeah,
And
it's
it's really smart of them to do that.
So it's a pretty intriguing story. So is this taught to you when it comes to criminology? Like, how do these people think? What are the directions that they choose? Like,
Yes.
can you just walk us through what kind of criminology did you learn in your tenure in the UK? And
Okay. So so we can talk about two major theories, okay, when it comes to understanding crime. So one thing that is taught to any person who enters criminology or any crime studies for that matter, there has been a debate over the years, and it's called nature versus nurture.
yeah,
Okay. And as the name suggests, there has been a debate which says a criminal is a born criminal or a criminal is a made criminal.
okay,
And we can't really come to any
Interesting.
solution to that.
okay,
Because if you take examples of some really famous criminals, for example, if you talk about Dawood Ibrahim,
Yeah.
in that matter, his dad was a policeman, still his son became a criminal. So it can't be nature. It is
was
nurtured. So he got it from somewhere else. He got into wrong company and got it done. But then again, there are also people whom I would say are born criminals. You know, I mean, the criminal, I mean, the family, their upbringing would be really, really good, but they just have criminal instincts in them. Like they get pleasure out of doing crime, you know.
Is this really a thing?
It is. For example, there was this case which happened in Bengal, Kolkata, I would say, back in 1980s, 70s, 80s.
Okay.
So, I mean, none of us are from that era, but I got to do this from my professor as well. So, you know, there was in Kolkata, there was a really famous style of blouses which came back then, which was sleeveless from one side.
Okay.
Like big polka dots and sleeveless. So, there was this one person who used to get on very, very, very crowded buses. And all he got pleasure is from, like, scratching their elbow, like, arm with a, what do you call it? What is the thing you use in shaving?
A blade.
Blade, sorry. Yeah, so you should just do that, like, just get that done. He just got pleasure seeing blood.
Seriously.
Yeah. So that
And
is
when
something.
was this?
This is, I think, 70s or 80s, somewhere between that,
Okay.
when that fashion was out there.
Yeah.
You know, and so this is a criminal instinct. You just get pleasure. I mean, say, the person was just sadistic.
Yeah, sadistic.
Sadistic in that matter. You know, just got.
Yeah, my father calls me I'm sadistic whenever I trouble him with, and I don't listen to him.
Listen to him, yeah.
But yeah, so like you said, your professors really had some great stories. So can you just walk us through what your journey was when you were in the UK studying about criminology, and also then the internships that you did, the jobs that you did?
Absolutely. Yeah. So, okay. So I'll come to that, yes.
Yeah.
So as I was saying, so one really, really interesting theory which I learned about crime in the UK, which we actually did go on field and see what happens, is so if you take any European city, for example, okay, every city is divided into zones. Okay, and these zones are concentric circles. So if you take any European city, there is a city center, then there is zone 1, zone 2, zone 3, zone 4. City center is a place where you have all of these shops, churches, cathedrals, everything in there. Then zone 1 is going to be all of the immigrant population living in there.
Okay.
Zone 2 is going to be a mix of immigration and the local people out there, or people who don't really have a lot of money, who can't afford to live in zone 3. Zone 3 is going to be a bit middle class population living up there, and zone 4 is going to be all nice plush people living out there.
Yeah.
Okay, so when they did a study about this, so you can see crime is always there in zones 1 and 2 more,
Okay.
because they don't have money. Secondly, they're immigrants, so they face a lot of crime, so they do a lot of crime against them. Okay, so this is something which we went on field and we actually studied. Okay, if you see the structure, okay, the cathedral is like a zone 1, then we do have a lot of immigrants living around it. So this is something we learned in the UK, because I don't think that works in India.
So basically what you mean to say is that crime is usually committed in places where there's very less, basically low class population.
Absolutely.
Is it something like that, or have you come across any incidents, where rich people or, good educated, well educated people and people who are making like good enough money, they have committed crimes? Have you come across any such incident?
I have, yes. So, so when we talk about the so-called educated class or the rich class, I would say they're just good at concealing their crimes.
Okay.
I mean, they commit a lot of crimes, a lot of them, but then they can just manage everything after that. Like,
Yeah,
as
because like we don't
yeah.
see it in the media.
Absolutely.
So it might be as often as the low class might
class,
do,
exactly.
but still we won't see
We
it
won't
because
see
they
it.
have money to cover it up.
Absolutely, cover the
That's
tracks
true.
up.
That's true.
Also, a lot of these things don't even come out. I mean, covering a track is one thing, but not even reporting it is one thing. They're just given money and they're like, okay, don't report this crime. Such things keep happening. When it comes to low class, it's much more reported, or it's much more widely seen. Also, when crime comes from a low class, any person who is about the class is going to report it.
Yeah.
Because we don't want that. I mean, it's fine. So these people are just used to doing crime. All they know is crime. But that's not the case usually. We are the one who suppress them to do crime. Not you and me, but the class suppress them to do class.
They have been forced to do some sort of crime.
Absolutely.
Because they have been seeing discrimination, they have been seeing all of these things on a daily basis.
Yeah.
Like if somebody is, if someone from if I'm a poor person and if someone from my family is working as a maid in somebody else's house, I'm seeing that she's not being treated fairly. She's been, maybe even beaten or abused on a
Absolutely.
daily basis.
Yeah.
Then it will drive me to, commit some sort of crime.
Absolutely.
Is this what it is?
Sort of, yes. Since you brought up this topic, there was like a really interesting study which happened. Like how you said, when you see crime, does it make you perpetrate a crime? Okay, so we all know violent video games. Okay, as simple as GTA Vice City. That is something we all played as kids.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have all seen violent video games, and nowadays if you see, they are like really really violent.
Yeah.
And it's easily accessible as well. You can do it on your mobile phone as such. So there was a study which happened where they tried to study, does violent video game really make a person commit crime? Like, do you learn from it and commit crimes? Not just video games, but also movies or some series, for example. But then there was also a counter study done which said it doesn't really. It helps you relieve stress.
Really?
Yeah. Sorry?
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
It does because, for example, I go to a very toxic office.
Okay.
Let's take a scenario like that. My boss is extremely toxic.
Yeah.
Okay. All people around me are toxic and they just harass me a lot with work all the time. There is a frustration building in me. But then where am I going to take it out? I can't just go on street and hit someone. I can't do that. I can't just go home and do some domestic violence because I don't belong to that sort of upbringing.
Yeah.
Okay. So what will I do? I'll just play video games and kill some 10 people in that. That relieves a lot of stress out of me. So if you see, Bangalore has come up with this really new concept right now where you can just go and thrash things in a room. You can see a lot of reels of it around recently.
I haven't seen, but I'm sure there's a lot of happening around this. Like for example, even the punching thing that got famous on Instagram.
Exactly. Yeah.
So it might be what can you say? I'm just falling short of words. But it's a result of people getting frustrated more and more on a daily basis.
Absolutely.
So,
Absolutely.
Good that you bring this point. Like it brings me to my point where if you, I don't know if you have seen, like I'm sure you must have, because he's famous a lot on social media. If you look at guys who talk about stoicism, okay, people like Andrew Tate, such people who promote stoicism, and they promote, like they say, like there's no such thing as toxic masculinity.
Don't frame it as toxic. Do you think that this plays a huge role? For example, I recently made a video, like I don't know if I've posted it yet on my Instagram, where I say that stoicism is extremely important, and the video was framed around the fact that the matrix that the thing that you deem as matrix is not really that bad because it teaches you a lot of good things as well, and one of that was stoicism. For example, the point that you mentioned, that your boss is toxic at the workplace, but still you have to deal with it. Like you have to take it like a gentleman.
Yep.
You can't go like कि यार तू क्या मुझे सिखा रहा है ये वो, and then
Absolutely.
just go in that room that you mentioned and trash people. What I feel is this comes from a very weak standpoint. Like if I'm mentally weak and if I'm not practicing to be a stoic on a daily basis, and if I'm not strengthening my mind, I'm definitely going to be more reactive.
Absolutely.
But all of us face some kind of situations, like not some, all of us face a lot of situations in which we feel like we should react more or we should vent out our anger. But what I feel is, if we practice stoicism on a daily basis, and if we carry ourselves in a way that nothing else can harm us psychologically but ourselves, I think that the crimes the crimes can be definitely limited. And also when we restrict guys like Andrew Tate or somebody who promotes stoicism and mental strength, I think this is a very huge factor. That if you can actually promote this into men, like don't be reactive, don't be that emotional that everything is
Absolutely.
bothering you till a point that you are getting frustrated and you want to vent out your anger, the crimes can actually be limited. And even stopped. Like stopping crimes is a very big thing, but this is my a very interesting take on it, and this is real when you go out and observe. Like even if we observe the local people who live in slums, who just drink all day and then go home and beat their wives, what do you think they are? Who do you think they are? They are just weak men, right? They are
Absolutely.
absolutely driven by emotion.
Absolutely. So I'm glad you got this point up, because emotion as a concept plays a really big role.
Exactly.
When it comes to doing anything, not just crime, but it plays a really, really big role. And when you talk about emotion in a very masculine form, it's not really talked about.
Yeah,
you know?
exactly. Exactly.
I agree with what you said. Like if you really nurture it into someone, saying that no, you shouldn't really take out revenge this way, or shouldn't do it that way, it would help
Yeah.
get crime down. It
Yeah.
definitely would help get crime down.
Yeah, because even when we hear these incidents of this the people from slum area getting drunk, going home and beating their wives, what do you think it is? It's all a part of emotion, right? All of these are weak men. So what do you think, like what is the role of emotion when it comes to crime, and how driven are criminals when it comes to emotion?
I would say emotion plays a very, very big role in that. A really major role, I would say, it comes to that. Because when we talk about emotions, they're usually underestimated in all of these things. But anything you do in your day-to-day life as well, it's all based on emotions, like how you feeling that time, or how do you want to feel that time.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's all about emotions. And if we really do something about it, or if we acknowledge some emotions, or ask, I would go in the gender role wise this. Okay, so men are really bad at showing out emotions.
Yeah.
or I would say processing emotions in that way. Okay, but if we give them a platform to do that, like if we give them a platform to process their emotions, then I think the crime rate would go down. Because I mean, for example, if a person is drunk and then is not getting a place to really exhibit what he wants to, then all he's going to do is just take it out somewhere else. And this is where, as I talked about the study earlier, if you yeah, okay, so when I talked about the video game story, for that matter, so if such a person gets a video game to take it out somewhere, crime is going to go down. Absolutely going to go down. Okay?
But no, see, again, going back to my point, what I mean to say is, you don't have to deal with emotions in a way that you have a channel to vent out your emotions. It's not like that when it comes to me. Like, at least this is my opinion when it comes to it. Because life as a man is hard. Okay, you have to earn things.
Absolutely.
And if you haven't earned anything, like for example, the example that we took, a drunk man living in slums, if he hasn't earned anything, if he hasn't gone out there and worked hard, try to give a better life to his family, and all he does is being depressed about why his boss isn't paying him that much, and going home, taking his wife's money and gonna get drunk, we can't. What I feel is we shouldn't let him have a channel to express his emotions, because his emotions are completely invalid. So what he has to do is that work hard, try to live a better life. So that's what I feel like. So channeling emotions is also a skill, right?
It is,
if we
indeed.
if we just give a channel everyone, like तेरे को क्या problem है मुझे आके बता, तुझे क्या problem है मुझे आके बता, then everybody is gonna be having some sort of problem.
Absolutely.
And then what's gonna happen is मेरा problem बढ़ा कि तेरा problem
तेरा
बढ़ा.
problem बढ़ा,
And then people are gonna justify their own problem saying कि मेरे life में ये है, मेरा problem बढ़ा, तेरे life में. And then when the egos don't match कि तेरा problem मेरे से बड़ा कैसा, and then again the emotion gets triggered.
Absolutely. And again, and it's again gonna, I would say, again gonna be to square one. Then again crime will come up.
Exactly.
So I completely agree with your point here, like what you said about emotions.
So you were in UK, right? What part of UK did you study?
So I was in Coventry.
So did you witness any kind of crimes, and did you witness any when you were in the UK?
I did, yes. I mean, there is something I actually saw happening. So it was a stabbing case. So it was around 11 p.m. I was going home from work, and I just needed some quick grabs from groceries. So I just got in a grocery store and I grabbed something. And then there was just a man who just came in running, and there were like two people behind him with a knife, and they just stabbed him. And it just happened. Of course, I never got to know what was the motive behind it or what happened to that case later on. But yeah, I mean, this is something like this is a really, I would say, primitive kind of crime which I saw happening, and it was such a big thing. Like stabbing was such a big problem back in the UK that
Was or is?
I would say is.
Yeah.
That was really good.
Yeah,
Catch,
because I'll tell you why I asked this. Last week there was a case like a 17-year-old guy stabbed a 15-year-old girl
Oh.
in London. Why?
Okay.
Because she didn't respond to his texts. Now, going back, see, a 17-year-old guy is extremely naive and driven by
Absolutely.
emotions. Like I remember when I was 17, I was extremely driven by emotions. Mera heartbreak ho gaya, mera ye ho gaya, I love this girl,
Yeah.
stuff like that. And everybody goes through this, right?
Yeah.
Now, what I mean to say is I wasn't weak because I dealt with it. Now, the society taught me or the social media taught me, it doesn't really matter, but I learned to be strong, right? Now, what I mean to say is if this guy's parents weren't ignorant and they had taught him like how to deal with these things and how to be emotionally strong, stuff like, I don't think it would have happened. And as a guy who's been through that, who's been through such a roller coaster of emotions when I was 17, I can definitely say that, you know, mastering our psychology and mastering our emotions shouldn't control us. We should control our emotions.
Emotions,
right? It could
absolutely.
have been stopped. It could have been
Absolutely,
stopped.
I totally agree to this, and this brings us back to the thing which I mentioned, the nature versus nurture, you know, and
Yeah.
this and this all comes under nurture, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, as you mentioned, if that guy was brought up in a really understanding way as a kid, maybe he wouldn't have done that, you know. I mean, then he would be the one, like what do you call it, controlling his emotions, and not the other way around.
Yeah.
So I totally agree to that point of yours. Yeah.
So when going back to your case, like how did it help you in any way, like seeing a stabbing in real life with your own eyes? Did it help you in any way with your studies and like your approach towards criminology and actually realizing how big of a thing crimes in London or even in the whole world actually are? Did it help you in any way?
I think it did. Yes, because see, reading something and then doing something in a practical life makes a lot of difference, you know.
Yeah. Because everybody likes to read motivational quotes.
Absolutely.
But who actually goes out and
Goes
puts
to-
in the work?
Exactly.
Nobody.
So reading about like how stabbing happens and seeing a stabbing happening with my own bare eyes made a lot of difference to me personally. Of course, I was a bit scared,
Yeah.
and
It could have been you.
yeah, it could have been me. You never know. You know, I mean, I was a bit scared, yes, but then it also gave me a thought. I mean, I would say a perspective to look at that crime. You know, I mean, I remember I went back home that night, and then all I was thinking is, what would have been the motive behind this?
Yeah.
Because as I said, every crime needs to have a motive to do anything. What could have been the motive? Okay, that man have taken money from him maybe and is not returning it back, or maybe it's just some sort of petty revenge. Because stabbing is not difficult.
Yeah.
Okay, you can just take a knife and just stab it to someone.
Yeah.
Then it did help me think in a lot of different perspectives, you know. Then I started making up different scenarios in my mind. Okay, this is something that would have happened
क्या
with
हुआ
him.
रह
या
सकता
क्या
है?
हुआ रहेगा? Like, oh, okay, ये हुआ इसलिए उसने उसको मारा. You know, and then when I related it to my study as such, it helped me.
Okay.
And this is something it is helping me now as well. You know, so one thing that criminology really gets you into is perspectives.
Yeah.
It is a field where 1 plus 1 is not always 2.
Yeah.
Okay, 1 plus 1 also makes 11.
Exactly.
Okay, it's all about your perspective, you
Yeah.
know. So when we talk about criminology, I can't really be thinking in a single direction. As I said, I have to put myself in the criminal's shoes, but I also have to put myself in the investigator's shoes.
Yeah, exactly.
So I have to think the other ways as well, you know, always. So yeah, so this is something I would say criminology is. It's all about your perspectives.
So moving forward, how did you go about it? Like, for how long were you in the UK, and then when did you come back, and what was your
Okay.
journey like after that?
Yes.
And what
So-
exactly did you study in the UK, and after that, what you did?
Yeah.
Just get us through that.
Sure. So, so I was in the UK for 4 years, and so I got a chance to do a sandwich course, which means I did my studies for 2 years. Then 1 year I did internships, and then I did my third year, my final year. So, if you want, I can tell you about my internships during that
Yeah,
time.
sure.
Okay, so I did 2 internships, and one of them was a really big international organization, which was into policing.
Okay.
Okay, and I was working on a research paper back then.
So
with them.
Interpol, you mean Interpol? We hear about
Yes,
them. Yeah.
yes. So international policing basically,
yeah.
and then I worked on a paper with them, which talked about. So since Afghanistan was a really big issue back then, I'm talking 2018.
Yeah.
A really big issue back then. So I was working on a paper with them, but I can't really tell you about it because it's not published yet.
Definitely.
Yeah, and then my second internship I did with a company called CSSS, that is Center for Society of Study and Secularism. And so CSSS was really interesting to work with because they were working with riot prone areas in India. So what CSSS did was, whenever there was a riot, after post riot, they used to go there, analyze the entire situation, and then they used to establish a peace center there. They used to teach people how crime or violence is not always the solution to things. You know, so there is a thing in justice called restorative justice.
Okay.
Okay, and what restorative justice is, talking out helps half your problems, helps solve half your problems.
Definitely.
You know? Yeah. So what happens in restorative justice is the perpetrator and the victim, they're made to sit in front of each other, and they're made to talk.
Okay.
Okay. So the victim's going to ask questions like, why me? Because that is always the question, why me of all people? But then the perpetrator also gets a chance to reason it, to explain it, why you and not any other person. So and there was a success rate with this.
Really?
Yeah. So of course you can't really explain a crime like murder with restorative justice.
Yeah.
But something that's less grievous as murder, you can always try some restorative
example?
justice. For example, something like domestic violence.
Okay.
You can try restorative justice for that. Just make them sit in front of each other and let them talk.
But see, when it comes to restorative justice, like you said, so let's say if there's a domestic violence case and we do this restorative justice thing, so doesn't it mean that the perpetrator is going to be punished, or is it just let go after
No.
that?
So both things can happen. Depends on the level or intensity of it. If it's a really primitive stage of domestic violence, they can just sort it out.
Like chata mara, something like that.
Sort of, because a lot of these domestic violence cases are also fake.
Okay.
Okay.
Really? Yeah.
So something like that can be solved with restorative justice. So restorative justice doesn't just serve the one purpose, but two purposes. Firstly, it's not like the person wouldn't be convicted. Okay, he's of course gonna get convicted, but it helps the victims. I mean, the victim gets a reason,
A closure.
a closure to that thing.
Yeah.
Like, okay, so the victim also gets to know, like, what was that person thinking while doing it on me. Okay, so they get a closure out of it. And if they don't get that, there's going to be revenge,
Yeah.
which is always gonna go in their mind always, and maybe the victim will become a perpetrator.
Yeah, because making peace with oneself is not a thing that everyone can do.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So yeah, this is something we worked on. And so as I talked about peace camps which we worked, so restorative justice was a big thing in peace camps, like just make them sit in front of each other and educate them about
And where
that.
was this?
So I never went on a peace camp
Okay.
myself, but peace camps were set up in areas like I think that time it was somewhere in UP. I'm not sure about the place.
So you never got to go at the place and study peace camps live?
Not really. Since I was an intern and going to a riot prone area is really risky. So I wasn't really given that exposure out there to do that. And then, like, talking about my journey forward, like I finished my bachelors. I did my BA in criminology, and then unfortunately Brexit happened, so I had to come back. Came back to India, but I couldn't just sit. So I gave an entrance, a national entrance to National Institute of Criminology, and then I got selected in that. So talking about National Institute of Criminology, it was called NICFS. Now it's merged with Gujarat Forensic Science University. It's merged with National Forensic Science University. So NICFS back then used to work under Ministry of Home Affairs. It was directly under it, so there was no so I would say there was no other influence on it.
Okay.
So we got to do a lot more stuff in there, you know. So my internship with NICFS when I was in my masters, I did it with Economic Offence Wing. And so to talk about Economic Offence Wing or EOW, whenever you report a financial crime, it goes to EOW.
Okay.
Of course, it has a threshold. They're only going to accept cases which are more than like 2 crores, for example. Okay, they won't accept anything below
middle
that.
class को कोई नहीं पूछता
कोई नहीं पूछता. Okay, so EOW used to solve such cases for the government, and it was really interesting to work with them.
Okay.
You know, so we were assigned to certain cases. So there were certain investigating officers who were on those cases, and we used to assist them. We used to get a lot of paperwork, and then we used to, you know, you see these things in movies usually, like there is a big pin board out there.
Yeah.
And there are like pictures on it, and you mark lines. That is what we used to do.
Really?
Yeah. So we used to sit with a lot of data, of course not on a soft board, but on our files, and we used to be like, okay, this person has done this thing to this one, but this is connected to this one. Okay, so by relativity, A is equal to B, B is equal to C, so this person has to be connected to this one. So this is something we did back then and helped them solve the cases. Like unfortunately due to COVID, we couldn't get a lot of exposure to it because I was supposed to do an internship with RAW.
Okay. Really?
Yeah, but then unfortunately because of COVID, we couldn't get in through with that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that is something I did. And so as I said, so during this internship, I really got interested into economic finances. Because firstly, traditional crime doesn't have any future.
Really?
Believe me, yeah. Because as more and more people are getting educated, so education is a really big factor, which plays a lot of... okay, let me reframe it. So education plays a really big factor when it comes to crime.
Okay.
So as we talk about slum, for example, an uneducated man from slum is more prone to stabbing someone than an educated person.
Yeah.
Right? Because I would try to talk to the person first before doing something, you know. Anyway, so I got into economic offences. So I did my specialization into economic offences. And so after that I started working. I was working with a company which worked as a third party vendor to a bank. And if you ask me now I work with a British fintech company called Revolut.
Okay.
And what I do is, so I am basically into fraud investigations.
Okay.
And transaction monitoring. So if you ask me about my work, like what work I do basically, yes. So I deal with PEPs. So PEPs are basically politically exposed people.
Okay.
So I deal with their accounts, their business accounts usually, and all I do is I just keep a track. Where is the money coming in from? Where is it going to? And a lot of times when it comes to accounts of politically exposed people, money laundering happens.
Yeah.
You know,
a lot of it.
So,
and we, like you going back to your last point, it never it never is exposed to the media because of the power that these guys
absolutely
have. And the money that these guys have.
Absolutely. So that's my work, to see if money laundering is happening now.
Yeah.
Or other part of my work is to deal with it after it has happened.
Yeah. So given the fact, you know, from what I've understood about you have a lot of experience when it comes to your internships, even when looking at live cases and the rest of your work that you have been doing since so many years. Which has been the most interesting case and which has been the most gruesome case that you have worked on?
Okay. So for gruesome case, I would say, so when I wrote my dissertation, okay, I got to introduced to this case. So my dissertation was on dowry and associated domestic violence in South Asian countries. The countries which I chose was Pakistan, India, Sri Lanka and Bangladesh. The 4 Indian subcontinent countries, basically. Okay, so while I was working on that, there was this case which happened in the UK. And so this person...
And when was this? You were in the UK?
Yes, I was in the UK.
Okay.
But the case had happened like pretty earlier, like
Okay.
3 to 4 years before that,
Mm-hmm.
when I was studying it. So what had happened is, you know, so dowry as a concept is very, we think it's very related to India,
Yeah.
okay, or I would say just South Asia,
Traditional family,
traditional
basically.
thing, but it's not. I mean, it's a very vast concept, and it's also practiced in other so-called developed countries.
Really?
Okay. Yeah. So when we talk about different cultures, if you talk about Spanish culture,
Hmm.
they do have dowries. You just don't name them dowry.
Hmm.
Right?
So it's like an unsaid rule or something.
Exactly. So nowadays, if you see, no one's gonna call it dowry, but it's a gift,
Yeah.
and there is a really thin line between a gift and a dowry.
Yeah.
So anyway, so coming back to the case, so there was this person who married this girl in India from a really really small town in Punjab, like extremely small town. I'd never heard of it, honestly. And they got married, and she was extremely rich, and they agreed to pay a lot of dowry to her. They paid it. So after that, as we
So the
have
girl's
seen,
family was extremely rich.
Yes.
And what about the guy's family?
they were all settled in the UK.
Okay.
So you can call them rich if you compare it to Indian standards, but they were like pretty mediocre back in the UK.
Okay. So she had to shift to UK.
Yes.
Okay.
So as we have seen in a lot of Bollywood movies as well, so she wasn't really called to the UK for a really long time. She was just staying with her parents back in Punjab. But then societal pressure started building up. Like, why is your wife?
शादी हुआ है, फिर
Why is your
illegally.
wife here?
हाँ.
And why is her husband there? Or something. So he agreed to take her. But as soon as she landed there, she was abandoned.
Really?
Yeah, she was abandoned out of it. This doesn't sound gruesome yet.
Yeah.
So she was abandoned after that. But then
it is definitely cruel, right?
it is indeed.
Because the definition that we have when it comes to gruesome, we
Mhm.
always think of some really gruesome physical cases, like somebody's
Absolutely.
been murdered
Absolutely.
or something like
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
But this does sound cruel, and in fact, it is cruel.
It is cruel, yeah. Anyway, so she was abandoned, and then, but she, in turn, since she was abandoned, she decided to take a revenge on him. And her revenge, the way of her revenge was against the law.
Okay.
Okay, she murdered him.
Really?
Yeah, she just went to his house and murdered him. And in turn, to take more revenge, her mother-in-law murdered her. I mean, it's really, I mean, it's really, should I frame it? It's really sad to hear about these stories. I mean, to what level people can do
But
this.
was there any reason? Like, did she at least get any justification of why she was abandoned? Like, I know
Yes,
definitely there's
because
no justification.
that guy was already married to someone in the UK. A lot of people do this. They marry people in India or other South Asian countries just for money, and then abandon their spouses just to get
Is
money.
this really a thing?
Yes, it's a really big problem. It's an absolutely big problem, but it's just never talked about.
So basically, the Indian girls.
Mm-hmm.
So this is like a warning to them, like don't marry someone just to go abroad
Without
or-
a proper background check, I would say. Yeah. I mean, as our parents used to say, they used to have a proper background check done. I mean, love is a different factor, but these are some things you should keep in mind.
This is the biggest.
Yeah.
This is the biggest sign why you shouldn't be blinded by love.
Absolutely, yeah. So this was something like one of the most gruesome cases which I worked on personally. Interesting is something I worked on with EOW, Economic Offence Wing. So Indian government gives certain grants or tax rebates to trusts.
Okay.
Right. So if you own a trust, you are exempted from tax sometimes, or you get some special benefits from that. So there is a process to do that, and it was really difficult back then. Then it all got digitized in 2017, 2018, 19. It all got digitized out there. So what government did is, since it should reach a lot of people, they made a small YouTube video on it. And they shared the link. Okay, if you don't know how to do it, go to this link, and then you'll get to see how to fill out the form and everything. There was this group of 18-year-olds, 17, 18-year-olds on a border at Assam between India and Bangladesh. There is a border town. They were there. And these people got to see that video somehow. What they did was they made a trust. anyone can make a trust. Even you and me can, if you want. They made a trust, and they defrauded Indian government with that. They made a trust. They took grants and everything from government, and they started. Since they were 17, 18, they were really naive. They didn't have brains. Like, as I said, crime is not just doing crime, it's also what you do after doing the crime.
Yeah.
Okay? They didn't know what to do about it. So they just put all this money in bank. Bank was happy about it. We got a lot of money. But then,
How much was it?
I think it was around 18, 19 lakhs back
Okay.
then. And what they did was, after depositing money, they started taking out money in big lumps. Okay, like took out 4 lakhs today, then 2 lakhs again tomorrow. So this was a suspicious pattern. No one does that.
Okay.
Like usually no one would do that. Like if you wanted to take out money, why did you put it in? Then it comes to money laundering.
Yeah.
You're just making it black to white. Okay. So bank intimated this thing to the police. This is something happening. Police eventually gave it to EOW, and then EOW did a lot of research on it, and they found out that these children, I would say, not children, but young adults, what they were doing is they were buying cars, second-hand new cars, and they were selling spare parts in Bangladesh.
Okay.
And that's how all the racket was going on.
Okay.
And they tried to do this again with the government,
Okay.
which is strange. So they were caught after that because and the reason this case came up is because it was happening on the border, and when something like this happens on a border, it's of course gonna get highlighted.
Yeah.
Always.
Yeah.
So they were caught. They weren't really convicted since they were sort of juveniles. They were given a warning: don't do this again, don't do that again. But they tried to do it again.
And then.
I'm like, how dumb can someone be?
Yeah.
And then but then after
Not
that
dumb,
they were
not dumb. They were extremely clever, like you
Not
said. So
really, I
selling
mean-
spare parts, but yeah, like you said,
yeah,
they were
why
naive.
would you do it again?
Yeah, because they were naive.
Yeah. And then they were caught again, and then they were convicted for that. And now I think they're serving jail,
Okay.
sentence in jail. But yeah, this was one of the interesting cases which I worked on because we really had people. Have you ever watched CID?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, right. I mean, we all did.
Yeah.
So we really had people posted on that border who were reporting to us कि सर वो बच्चा भी यहाँ से यहाँ गया है, उसने पैसे निकाले हैं, ये गाड़ी ली है, मैं क्या करूँ अभी इसका. So we really like working out as an operation to that,
Yeah, yeah.
So it was really fun to do that. I like doing that. So like I think that was one of the most interesting cases I've
Yeah.
dealt with.
But yeah, when you mentioned the thing that the juveniles weren't convicted. So when we talk about the Nirbhaya case, which actually shook the whole nation, if not the whole world, why were the juveniles let go in that case?
So when it comes to law in India, especially like IPC, Indian Penal Code, it always takes a very soft upper hand on juveniles, because your brain is developing till you turn 18, is what
The
legally
science
is.
teaches
Yeah,
us,
science
yeah.
teaches us, yeah. Although we don't.
Yeah.
Yeah, but according to them, your brain is developing. And all this is you can be under someone or something's influence while doing it.
Okay.
So it won't be your brain. When you talk about that case specifically, we can always say there were other adults as well who influenced them to do that.
Yeah.
But I don't think personally that happened.
Yeah, definitely.
I mean,
Definitely.
when I remember when I was 18 or 17, I had my own brain. I knew what I was doing.
Definitely, that's why I said, right?
Yeah.
So even if I was going through a rough patch when I was 17 or 18, I still knew how to deal with it. Like I didn't
Absolutely.
involve other people, I didn't harm other people.
Yes.
And that's what I mean when I say like, you should be aware enough to realize what's right and what's wrong. It's not
Absolutely.
like इसका influence है तो मैंने वो किया, उसका influence है तो मैंने ये किया.
Absolutely.
And moving forward, what happened was no girl feels safe in India now.
Absolutely. They don't. I mean, I've stayed in Delhi for 3 years
Okay.
with my masters and
So
my
what was your
job.
experience about that? Like, did the situation get cooler moving forward after the Nirbhaya case, or did it just spike? When were you in Delhi?
I was in Delhi from 19 to 22 end now. So
Okay.
23 start, I would say. So I think it did cool down a bit because definitely government did take up some steps to avoid such things again, because I could see like in Delhi especially there was a lot of more security deployed. So each and every bus in Delhi has a police constable in it. be it
Okay.
any time of the day.
Okay.
Okay, so because we shouldn't really come like it's a really sad state for such thing to happen again.
Yeah, it's our capital after all.
Absolutely. And then yeah, so I mean there were measures put out after that, and people did feel a bit more safer after that out there. Also, people in general got a lot more I would say not enlightened but vigilant about it,
Yeah.
you know. I mean, people started taking things up seriously
Yeah.
after that.
They weren't taking anything for granted, especially their security.
Absolutely. So, for example, I personally wouldn't go to a secluded area after dark, after it's dark.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah, it
nothing-
doesn't matter if you are a guy or a girl. It's
Absolutely.
like, who recommends you to go after?
Go after
Yeah.
dark. I mean, unless it's very
कोई emergency है तो बात अलग
emergency
है.
hai, so I can go there. I'm not saying you shouldn't go, okay?
Mhm.
But then, you know, it's also a cultural difference. For example, if you see in a place like Mumbai,
Hmm.
even my mom comes home at like 1 or 2 in the night. It doesn't
Yeah.
matter. It's really safe out here.
Mhm.
It's a cultural thing to be outgoing as
But
such.
it's like, testing the waters.
Mhm.
So if you're a really pretty girl, you're 19 or 20 years old, and just because you feel like going out at 12 or 1 a.m. to just have some drinks with your friends or something like that, then who is assuring your security? There's nobody. It's you who's responsible for the
Absolutely.
things that will
And
happen
I
to you,
think
right?
I would personally blame government for that.
Okay.
Because the government is supposed to make a safe place for its citizens.
Yeah. And yeah, moving forward, what do you think the comparing India to rest of the foreign countries, now that because you said we feel safer in European countries and stuff like that, so what do you think the crime rate is compared when we compare Europe or US to India especially?
I think there is no firm answer to this because crime is a very dynamic concept. So crime is always going to be different at different places. For example, in a country like India or US, shooting is a really big crime.
Okay.
Okay?
Even in India?
Yes, it is. Like if you go to some northern states, it's a really big crime. But when you compare it to the UK, it would always seem like a very, very, very big crime. But guns, for that matter, are really controlled in the UK. So for them, stabbing is going to be a really big crime. So the crime rate also depends on what type of crime you're comparing. You know, so you can't really compare two different countries on a crime rate as such, because for me, my problem is always going to be bigger than yours.
Yeah, definitely.
Right. So I don't think there is a definitive answer to comparing crime rates as such.
Okay, but do you really think that the European countries or other countries are safer than India?
I think in some aspects, yes. Like since having lived there for a while, in some aspects, yes. Definitely, yes. Like, honestly, I wouldn't personally mind going out at 2 a.m. and I would be scared of something in Europe.
Okay.
But as you mentioned, it also comes with the people's mentality about that, you know. So I think yes.
And it also depends on what area you're living. So like you said, if you live in zone 1 or zone 2 when it comes to the UK, it's definitely not safe to go out at 2 a.m.
It isn't.
Maybe. But I'll tell you one thing, since the last month, because I work, at midnight, and me and my friend, like since 2 weeks we have been going out at 2 a.m. just to have a cup of tea. So what I can say is, where I live, I feel safe going out at 2 a.m. Okay. But if you mention the UK and if you mention the zone 1 or zone 2, you might not feel safe. So it's
Absolutely.
also about what areas you live in when it comes to the countries, right?
Absolutely, it is. I would say it also depends on the type of people living in there, you know. So for example, for you, your area, you would feel safe at 2 a.m.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't, maybe.
Yeah.
You know, or maybe I would feel safe in my area, but you wouldn't, maybe. You know, so it
Yeah.
also depends on. So when we compare a data, there are a lot of factors to it. So we can't really be sure about a single certain thing when it comes to data. you
Yeah,
know.
like a lot of it comes to psychology.
It does. It does. Yes.
And if I ask you right now, like, what is the one thing that you would like to change that would bring the crime rates down in India, overall India, so what would it be?
Okay, that's a tricky one.
Yeah.
if we talk about overall India, so does it have to be materialistic or
anything, and it's not just related to one crime कि अगर for example murder rate नीचे लाना है तो क्या, या
Okay.
theft rate, nothing
Overall
like that,
about
just one thing, like we talked, like, right, so the psychology plays a huge role.
It does. I think then I would say my answer would be like the level of education.
Right.
Because personally, I feel education plays a very,
Very
big
major.
role when it comes
Very
to crime,
major.
you know. I mean, and in a country like India, which is still a lot illiterate,
Yeah.
I think if we get the literacy rate up, crime is definitely going to go down.
Yeah, that's
It
true.
is.
That's true. And also, when it comes to education, people, or especially the youth, should be educated about what's right and what's wrong.
Wrong,
Rather than,
absolutely.
teaching them about history and geography and.
I mean, that is important too, but yeah, I mean, yeah, I get your point. So I remember I used to work with this NGO, like just a part-time thing in free time, where they used to teach good touch and bad touch to primary students, like primary class students, which was a really good initiative.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, because then if I was a girl, I would know what the bad touch is.
Exactly.
And as a boy, I would know where not to touch. Or where a girl would be uncomfortable touching, or where myself would be uncomfortable getting touched upon.
Yeah,
You know?
yeah.
So that is something that would play a really big role when they grow up.
Yeah. And what I mean to say is, if I come from a not so privileged family and still my parents are managing to give me the life that they can, I wouldn't be able to get certain things. But I should be made aware of the fact that, okay, my family is trying to provide for me. They are trying to give the best life, the best possible life that they can. So I should be made aware of that fact first, even in schools and other institutions, instead of, just teaching me about American Tea Party.
Absolutely. No, that does make sense. Yes.
Yeah.
Like I mean, so I don't know. I mean, Marathi मध्ये शब्द आहे जाणीव असली पाहिजे.
Exactly.
You
should be aware enough.
You should be aware enough of that.
Yeah, that's what I mean when it comes to the education, because traditional education, if you look at it, it never focuses on the fact that what's going on in the society, what's actually required when it comes to when you carry yourself out in the world, like
that's a really sad state.
Yeah, exactly.
That's a really, really sad state. But yeah, I mean, let's hope it changes.
Yeah.
I think it is changing eventually, because
with the help of internet and everything, everybody can be educated these
also
days.
yeah, that's what I was coming to. I mean, education is not just I would say fixed to school nowadays.
Exactly.
Your mobile phone plays a very big role. Your WhatsApp University especially plays a very big role in that.
Exactly. So yeah, Rajas, it was great having you. Nice to have you on Caffeinated.
Thank you so much.
Thank you guys. Like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.